are interviewing today Dr. Lloyd Corder. As everybody who has seen my YouTube channel in the past knows, I frequently interview people inside and outside of the law uh, for all sorts of informational um, uh, and data and input that we can talk to people about and explore. So Dr. Corder is a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and I was actually introduced to Dr. Corder by my daughter Julia, who took one of his classes. And she shared with me Dr. Corder's book, one of the many books that he's written, Success 101, which was one of the course materials, I think, that my daughter utilized in your class. I was fascinated by it. I am a heavy reader of Napoleon Hill and the progeny of, uh, of those who follow him and success literature. So I was really encouraged, and I found it refreshing when I read your course materials, Dr. Corder. So I'm going to ask, how did you get into this area of study and teaching? What exactly do you do, both in the school setting and outside of the school setting? And what kind of feedback do you get from what young people that you teach?
Well, Stuart, thank you for inviting me on for a few minutes to visit with you and your listeners. To answer that question, that's a great question. I've been teaching for 30 years or so now, since I was in graduate school all the way through. And I own a marketing research and consulting firm where we do what we preach, which is basically I like to tease people. We call you during dinner and ask you questions about what you think of different topics or ideas, and all of the research and the focus groups and all those sorts of things. But we try to help companies become smart. And so, at the University of Pittsburgh, the course that your daughter was in was a course called Organizational Communication. And while being organized is important, that's not what they're talking about. What we're talking about is how do businesses communicate with people or other businesses. And it quickly dawned on me that a strategic plan is a lot like your personal goals, or a marketing plan is a lot like how you would promote yourself. And so to motivate the students, what I did was basically divide the course into two sections. The first section was personal development issues, where they learn about time management or how to be a more effective leader or how to assess their current goals and how to actually write a coherent marketing plan for themselves, these sorts of topics. Then the second half is we get a real live client, usually a nonprofit organization such as a YMCA or a church or a nonprofit group that has some sort of challenge that they're facing from a marketing or a communication standpoint, and students form teams and they actually go out and they do real work for those organizations and make the recommendations and or build a website or whatever their challenge was supposed to be. They go ahead and do that for that particular client. So I guess to answer your question, over the years what's happened is I've seen a lot of academic courses where they want students to take tests and learn things, and it's all baloney. When I get out there in the world, I mean, I read these books on marketing research. They're 500, 600, 700 pages long, and I'm like, we don't do any of that stuff. And clients have paid me millions of dollars to find out information. What is this nonsense? It's some nonsense some professor somewhere came up with, and some of it's interesting, but most of it is terribly unuseful. So how do we make this thing useful? And so that book you have there that you showed was the little course book that goes along, and 10 or 20 or 30 pages on a topic to try to really get the students focused on what's going to make them successful in their organizations and in their lives. And so over the years, getting to know people like Napoleon Hill, and he has a great book, as you know, Think and Grow Rich, and all the things he did. And he was pretty much the father, I would say, of this kind of self-help, self-motivation type institute nearly 100 years ago. And a lot of people have come along since then. So anyway, I like sharing that with the students. And then I don't know if you remember this, but a lot of people say Napoleon Hill got his start by a conversation he had with Andrew Carnegie, who challenged him to go out. Well, Andrew Carnegie and Pittsburgh are pretty intertwined. In fact, just a quarter mile from here on Pittsburgh's north side, where we're in downtown Pittsburgh, just across the river, is the house that Andrew Carnegie in the neighborhood he grew up in. And And I always tell the students about, if you read his autobiography, he claims and says that much of his life was influenced over a game of darts in the basement of his house. He was over at his uncle's house apparently, and a friend came over and they were playing darts, and his friend wanted to know where could he find a runner for the telegraph office to deliver telegraph messages. And from that, he met a lot of his friends that he eventually went to work for the telegraph office for the railroads, and he had a great career there, and the railroads were who bought all of his steel. And he says if that dart game didn't go on, there wouldn't have been an Andrew Carnegie. And what I find fascinating, I'm not sure there would have been a Pittsburgh as we knew it. There might not even be a United States of America as we know it. So it's not too hard with the history and the pieces like that, especially locally, to get the students pretty excited about this. And, you know, we all love to think about ourselves and plan our futures, and so that's what I really try to do to them, get them fired up and get them excited. And, you know, why does it have to take 10 years to do something? Let's get it done in 2 weeks. How are we going to do that? How are you going to plan it out? And most of the students, once they get exposed to that, they really take to it very, very well. So that's in a kind of a broad sense the philosophy of what I'm trying to do with them.
That's great stuff, and keep up the great work. I mean, you know, that's what, as a small business owner, I find it very, very refreshing to hear that. I never heard the dart game story. That was very cool. Before we went live, you and I talked briefly, and I understand that the curriculum of the universities and some high schools is changing for the better and teaching more of this stuff. Is that so?
Yes, that's true. There's something in the universities called service learning. And what they're trying to do, it's even at the University of Pittsburgh, they have a new chancellor now, but the most recent chancellor, a big part of his work was trying to encourage the classroom to get out into the community and become more relevant. And instead of talking about tests and writing papers and so forth, how do we do things where the students can learn, but they're also helping an organization or a community improve itself? And that, you know, this might sound crazy, but instead of just writing an English class, a friend of mine did this. I thought it was fascinating. She was on the board of the Pittsburgh Zoo. She had her students go out and write narratives of what tour guides might say about each of the animals and how they might, if the animals were talking, what they would say, so on and so forth. So they're getting the writing, they're getting the principles and so forth, but they're also going to be using that on another level. So that's kind of the challenge. I've also seen that on the grade school, middle school, and high school level. Even in my hometown, I've gotten to know our superintendent very well, become a friend of mine. He has the same thing. How do we get the high school, how do we get the middle school out there in the community, not only so the students can learn, but more importantly, if people perceive it to be this great resource, then when it's time to raise the taxes or pay their property tax bill or what have you, there's not as much consternation, and they're like, well, we are getting something out of it. These people are changing. But yeah, I was surprised just within the past month or so. I went into one of my daughter's conferences, and you know, kids, they don't tell you anything. I looked at it. They had her goals written down. She had action plans, and
Right.
I was talking to the teacher, and the teacher said the same thing. Said, well, this is what we've been teaching, trying to make it more successful. I said, well, holy smokes, this is the sort of stuff I'm trying to do with my students, and here I didn't even know what was going on with my daughter. I was very appreciative to have learned that. So you're absolutely right. We're seeing that all over the place, and I think it's a big push in education to get from grade school all the way through college to get the students more involved in the real world. You will always have faculty and teachers that resist that, but I think that's going to be our future because the education is much more valuable, and the students come out a lot better prepared, in my opinion.
I agree with you. Well, listen, Dr. Corder, this has been a great conversation. I don't want to take up too much of your time. We really appreciate you spending the time to speak with us. And as I say, keep up the great work.
Well, it's great to meet you, Stuart, and please give my regards to Julia. She was a terrific student for inviting me and talking with your listeners.
Take care.
Okay, thank you.